Good evening. I first want to welcome you guys tonight. My name is Crystal Watts, and I'm the president of the Vallejo Education Association. Vallejo Education Association represents about 700 teachers here in Vallejo and other educators. And I can't tell you how happy I am to see so many people here. I know that it's a Thursday night. You know, we've worked hard today. We have teachers in the audience. We have community members in the audience. And I just appreciate you guys taking this time out of your busy schedules to come together as a community. You know, I firmly believe that, you know, our schools are an integral part of our community. And until we start talking about some of the issues that we're facing in Vallejo, and the impact that's having on our students, that we're not going to be able to move forward. So that's kind of where this idea stemmed from. We've had some serious issues this year on our campuses that my teachers I represent have come to me about. And so we've had a couple of other forums that were mostly directed for our teachers. So then I thought, at some point we need to start bringing the community in. Because I know that for our students that they're also facing some of the same, well, they are facing some of the same issues that our teachers are facing in the classroom. So all that being said, I first want to introduce some people in the audience, and I'm going to let Hampton Deck, and I don't know your official title for the church here.
I'm the pastor.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for coming. We are glad to host this. First Presbyterian Church is celebrating this year its 150th year in Vallejo. We moved to this site in 1954 and started worshiping here in 1955. So we've been in this building longer than I've been alive. So that tells you a little bit how old I am. I'm glad to be here. I come from a family of educators. My father started out as a high school teacher and coach, then became a counselor, then was the youngest principal in the Atlanta School District in the history of that district, eventually became a large city school superintendent. And so we're glad to host this. I wanted to say if you have to use the bathroom, the bathrooms are behind the sanctuary. Just go out that way and down the hallway and you'll see the signs. We're glad you're here. We're glad to host this event. Thank you.
Thank you. I also wanted to recognize Senator Lois Wolke's office is represented tonight by Tracy Cruppen. And then we also have Larry Allen here, who is CTA Board of Directors, as well as Terry Jackson, who's also another CTA Board of Directors. And then we also have Dave Hernandez, who is our community outreach, community organizing, everything to do with community through CTA. And then later on, you're going to hear from Eric Hines, who is our CTA Vice President. So kind of what I thought we would do tonight is that we'd first start with, I have a parent in the community who has contacted me who said that she'd be willing to kind of talk about what she has experienced. And so I'd like for her to come up right now and introduce herself.
Okay. Hi, my name is Melissa Cole, and I'm a parent of 3 students here in the Vallejo City Unified School District. And I was asked to come tonight and speak about some issues we've been dealing with, particularly just this year, but it's been a couple years of bullying that my son's put up with. So I typed it out so I don't go off on a tangent. So I already said that my kids attend VCS, and while VCS is a wonderful school with amazing parents and a dynamic staff, I love this school, but I feel that it is time to let people know that bullies are found everywhere, even at VCS. Last year, my son was bullied and ultimately ended up being punched in the face. This year, he has been bullied with threats of being punched in the face on a daily basis. He has been called gay and other names not appropriate for me to repeat in this forum. He has been pushed down, teased, and intimidated by this bully all year long. My son made himself a target when he stood up against the bully for picking on another student. He had come home one day and told me he felt bad for this student because he was being picked on for looking different. This student has a disability that requires hearing aids to be implanted behind his ears. When I explained to my son how hard it must be to live with that every day, he developed great empathy for the student and befriended him. He began standing up against the bully, which is when my son became the target. The bully has flipped desks over in the classroom when he was angry and even assaulted another student this year. He is consistently disrespectful to his teacher and office staff as well. He even flipped over a desk while cursing out a parent visiting the classroom. Was he sent home or suspended for this behavior? No. Only when he physically placed his hands on another student was this bully suspended. My son has developed an anxiety about going to school, as have I about dropping him off. As I drive him to school, my heart races, I get shaky, and sometimes even feel sick to my stomach. Lost my place. He is a student that only 2 years ago had a passion for learning and for school, a student that the district office is failing to protect because they want lower numbers on paper. To know that this bully is allowed so much power over a peer, a teacher, even a family, is absurd. I have met with the principal, the student's guardian, the student, and my son. In this meeting, the student admitted he was bullying my son for no reason, that my son was doing nothing to him in particular to cause this bully to behave this way towards him. He showed no remorse and took no responsibility for his actions. He was made to go through the motions of apologizing, but I could tell he wasn't sorry. I was under the impression that there was a zero-tolerance policy for bullying in this district. With the recent experience I have had, it feels more like there's a don't ask, don't tell policy in place. If the district doesn't ask our schools if there's a bullying problem, and our schools don't tell the district there's a bullying problem, then there must not be a problem, right? Wrong. So very, very wrong. The pressure put on the administration at the school sites to keep their numbers down leaves them with their hands tied. In a sense, the school sites themselves are being bullied into sweeping issues under the rug by the district. Bullying has become an epidemic here in the VCUSD. It's time to stand up and say enough is enough. Our students and staff deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I really do appreciate it. At this time, I'd like to ask some of our teachers, some of our classified staff, if they can just kind of share some of the things that they have seen, experienced this school year. You know, you don't necessarily need to identify the school site unless you're comfortable doing that. So if I could get some people that would be willing to stand up and kind of share what they've experienced, that would be great. Yes, Larry has offered to run the mic. Anybody? I know, guys, I get phone calls all the time.
Hello, my name is Ron West and I teach at Stephen Manor. This year we've had several violent issues. We've had a child bring a weapon to school, threaten his teacher. We've had parents get in fights in the middle of the school. The police have had to come and remove them. We've had lockdowns because the police were chasing people with weapons. That's happened a couple times. Kids who are disruptive, they come back to the classroom. They don't get sent home. These things happen all the time.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yes.
I just wanted to make a short comment, and it's not really about the school system. It's about this young man that stuck up for another student. I'm hoping it's you. Thank you so much for being so courageous and such a kind person, because we need to reinforce behavior like yours. So I can only imagine how proud your mother must be of you, and what a great job she's done in teaching you to act that way. So thank you for being a hero.
Yeah, hi. Excuse me. I'm a teacher at Vallejo High School right next door, and we've had a lot of issues this year. A number of our teachers have been assaulted, verbally and physically. We have 3 teachers out right now on workman's compensation, probably for the rest of this year. And in some of the cases, it took a lot of complaining and a lot of effort to get any kind of action taken against the students. Often the students are brought back to our school. Now, lately, there's been more of an effort to, take care of the situation, but for a long time, not much was happening. So a lot of the teachers feel unsupported at our school site, that administration is not watching our back, not, taking care of us, and if we are being threatened or, physically or verbally abused, that the student is more supported than we are. The bullies are supported more than the teachers and the students who are being bullied. And that should not happen. It should be the other way around. The district should support students who are trying their best, trying to be in school, trying to do what's right, and the teachers who are trying to do their best, trying to do what's right, teaching our students. We can't do very well as teachers if we are worried about our backs, if we're worried about students using violence and physical or verbal violence against teachers. And it happens way too often. It's not just against us. I mean, the students are bullied as well, way more than the teachers are. There's fights almost daily at our campus, and a lot of times the students who are doing the fighting are right back on campus a few days later. And there's no real good place to put students who are not succeeding in school and not doing what they need to do. They're just put right back in our classrooms time and time again, instead of an alternative placement. Maybe that might be more appropriate for some students.
Any campus supervisors, office managers, classified at all that would like to share?
My name is Lamont Wright, and I am the lead site safety supervisor at Solano Middle School. And just hearing some of the things that's going on, it happens everywhere. Personally this year, I've been assaulted by a parent. My principal has been assaulted by a student, put up for expulsion, put right back on our campus. 2 weeks later, same student assaulted that principal again. The things that go on the campus, a lot of people really don't have a clue about what really does take place on our campuses. We need more involvement. As a parent, the one thing I can say is my child will never see a day of public school in Vallejo. I work for the school, but my child will never attend a Vallejo school. The education that the kids are getting or trying to receive is being hijacked by the ones who really don't want to be there. And it's the ones who don't want to be there that are being protected the most. So at some point, we as a community need to step up and demand that this doesn't take place anymore. Because the kids who want to be there deserve to have our effort, our time that we give and not waste it. No kid is, I'm not saying we waste our time, but we waste our time sometimes.
Thank you.
We have someone up here?
I'm a teacher at Pennycook School, and the problem we have is that there's inconsistent consequences for students. Some students get in-house suspensions, some students are sent home, and it's really difficult when the students see someone has flipped off a teacher and they're back on campus that same day. It's really hard for the teachers to maintain any kind of respect or order because it sets a bad example. And I understand students are coming from all kinds of backgrounds and have difficulties from home, but if we tolerate things from students like that, violence or any kind of bullying, then it does make it difficult for the ones who are trying to learn. And it makes it difficult for us to do our jobs, to teach the respect and what they need to be successful in life. Because acting that way is not going to get them anywhere. And we are trying to at least make them resilient and able to take care of themselves even after they leave us. So that's what we're dealing with at Pennycook School.
My name's Diane Klingy, and I teach 3rd grade. And I've had incidents this year that I've never experienced in my close to 40 years of teaching. I have students who throw desks, chairs, and I'm talking about girls that are 8 and 9. This year I've had parents fighting, arguing in my room, where I've had to try to encourage them to go outside to carry on their conversations. I had a child, after throwing a chair and totally disregarding what I and anyone else she found was suspended. Her mother came back the next day and accused me of assaulting her child. I had never touched the child, but it was my word against hers. And I've never been put in the position where I had to defend my character as a teacher like I've had this year.
You know, as president, I've not been in the classroom full-time the last couple of years. But I'm going to tell you that as a classroom teacher, my absolute last resort was turning to a referral to send a kid out. You know, I would try strategies A through Z before I would send the kid out. Because I think we all recognize that when a kid is sent out, you know, there's a couple things that happen. The first is that you automatically lose that authority. The second is that you recognize that they are not learning. And I think that all of us can agree that every child wants to learn. It's about how do we figure out to get those kids who, you know, either family background, poverty, whatever it is that they come into our classrooms with, they don't have the strategies in place themselves in order to take the gift that we're trying to give them. So I think for all of us, you know, educators in the room, we don't want kids sent out. You know, that is an absolute last resort. The other thing is that suspensions and expulsions, I think all of us would agree, they're high at Vallejo. The missing piece, though, is the fact that we continue to cut our budget to where all of the resources that used to be there 5, 6, 7 years ago are no longer there. And so teachers, administrators are having to deal with it all on their own. Whereas we used to have counselors, we used to have psychologists and psychiatrists. You know, now we have maybe one psychiatrist that oversees 3, 4, 5, 6 different schools. What kind of help are they going to be able to realistically give when they're having to serve, you know, a couple thousand kids? That's not sustainable, and it's certainly not acceptable to me that we're sending our kids into schools that really do not have the resources to meet all of their needs. But, you know, I'm about finding solutions. You know, that's the reason why you guys are here tonight. So I just kind of wanted to talk about a couple things that BEA is doing. One of the things when it became so obvious back in November that we were facing some more serious issues that we've been facing even over the last couple of years is that we put together a survey. You have that in front of you. And so I just kind of wanted to go over what our teachers feel. About a third of our teachers completed this survey, from elementary, preschool, all the way up to our high schools and adult school. So it's a wide spectrum of teachers, about a third, and it was done a couple of ways. We had online accessibility, and then we also had hard copies. Obviously, we told teachers if you did the hard copy, don't do the one online, or if you did the one online, don't do the hard copy. And so I just kind of wanted to go over this survey. It was open for about a month and a half, so we gave people plenty of time to complete the survey. So as you can see, if you look at the first question, it says school staff and administration uphold all discipline policies. We have almost 3/4 of our teachers reporting that they don't agree with this. The school provides adequate training for staff on school policies and procedures. We have about 64%, if you combine strongly disagree and disagree, that's saying they don't agree with that. Emergency response plans are known by all staff, teachers, and administration. We have, if I did my math right, about 60% that don't agree with that. That means that emergency plans such as earthquake drills, fire drills, what do we do when an intruder comes on our campus, are not being done. Question number 4. Emergency response drills are performed regularly by teachers and students. Again, we have about 65% or so that say that they don't agree with that. Number 5, it was basically a fill in your own kind of response type of thing. So it was a whole bunch of different responses. That's why you don't see anything there. It was an eye opener for me. I had teachers say that they haven't had any fire drills this year. They had an earthquake drill the day after that one earthquake that happened back in February or March, kind of after the fact. Several schools reported not having any fire drills, earthquake drills, any types of drills for the last couple of years. That should concern the community. Number 6, we're doing a good job here. The school has an anonymous student hotline for reporting potential safety problems such as threats. We mostly agree. Number 7, school administration takes all threats and rumors of violence seriously and investigates appropriately. We have about half of our teachers that don't feel that they do. School administration effectively deals with students who are suspected of using illicit drugs on campus. This one, I should have probably only had our secondary teachers complete because this tends to be more of a secondary issue. And so I think that's kind of the reason why you see some disparity there. Because we only had about 40% of our teachers say that they weren't being dealt with. Number 10, how satisfied are you with the level of support the administration gives to teachers for dealing with discipline problems? 70% are either dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. That means our teachers are not feeling supported in their classrooms. Overall, and I'm not sure why this didn't turn out, must have been a light color, so I apologize for that. Overall, how safe do you feel in your classroom? You know, for the most part, we feel safe. There's only 28% that doesn't feel too safe or not at all safe. And then number 12, overall, how safe do you feel outside at your school site? We have about 40% that say that they don't feel safe outside. So basically when they're walking their campuses, they're reporting that they're not feeling very safe. 13, how fearful are you becoming a victim of crime at your school site? Again, we have about 34% saying somewhat afraid, 31% that are slightly afraid. I'm on question number 13. And then we have about 20% who are saying not afraid at all. 14, overall, how satisfied are you with your school's safety policies? We have 37% saying dissatisfied, 25% very dissatisfied. A huge portion. 15, overall, how satisfied are you with your school's emergency response plan? Again, we have 31% dissatisfied, 16% very dissatisfied. Number 16, have you considered leaving this school district to take a position in another district due to concerns regarding safety? We have yes saying 42% of our teachers saying yes, and 56% of our teachers saying no. I think the next one is significant. Have you considered leaving this district to take a position in another district due to lack of support from district and or site administration. We have 60% of our teachers who say yes. And I'm going to tell you that if our economic conditions were better, these numbers would probably be much higher if we were dealing with these same issues. But I'm going to also tell you that I think that some of the issues that we're dealing with directly have been impacted by our economic conditions, as I mentioned earlier. So that's our survey. On the green paper here, I just wanted to highlight one of the things that VEA is doing. We've applied for a $20,000 grant through CTA, and this is going to focus on Vallejo High and surrounding neighborhood. We're going to be working with, if we get it, we're going to be working with our parents. We're going to be working with our leadership groups, student groups on the campus. We're going to be working with our feeder schools, our feeder middle schools. And, you know, again, I'm not about just complaining about things. You know, I tend to be one of these people who thinks, okay, yes, there's a problem, but we need to figure out a solution to the problem. And so I'm hoping, I think, and we have Vallejo High School teachers here tonight, I think that one of the things that they will tell you that part of what has happened this year is we have to remember Hogan High School closed last year. What did that mean? That meant that we had kids from Hogan High coming on to Vallejo High, and unfortunately there wasn't a good plan put in place on bringing these different communities together. And so that's what we hope to do next year by, hey look guys, we are all Vallejo High School. We own this school. Let's show that we own, show some ownership in this school. From the teachers, site administration, from our students, and from our neighborhoods. So that's what our plan there is, and you know, we hope that it's successful next year, that, you know, and I hope that we get the grant as well. So that's what this green sheet is, and you know, I'm happy to answer any questions about that. David, when do we find out if we get it or not?
Hopefully
in a few weeks. Okay, and I will certainly publish something in the newspaper, get something published in the newspaper if we get it. Yes? I'm not going to say that Bethel's okay. The grant was for $20,000. Most of the issues that I'm hearing really in regards to direct you know, issues on safety, I'm hearing from Vallejo High. I think that Vallejo High got the majority of the students when the school closed. So, anybody want to make any comments on that? Jesse Bethel teachers here? Any? Okay. Do you want to, do we have the mic?
I'm Lori Tackmeyer, and I'm a teacher. I've been teaching the district for 13 years. I'm also one of your elementary directors. And you commented that our suspension rate is up. And I wanted to say yes and no. It said in the newspaper that 1 in 5 students are suspended in Vallejo. And that's actually a false number. We did the math at our site, and we have, oh goodness, a 12% suspension rate. No, we don't. We have 27 suspensions for the year. Of those, we have 7 offenders. 7 people. They're saying 1 in 5 of our kids are being suspended. That's not true. We have 7 kids who are repeatedly causing problems within our classrooms, within our school sites. It's not 1 in 5 students. It's 1 student repeatedly trashing the hallways, throwing desks, moving chairs, not being able to function in a classroom. So I really wanted to clarify that fact. Our suspension rate is not as high as it's published. Our numbers are not looked at correctly. I don't know, I was a math minor, so I looked and said, this 1 student's been suspended 6 times. Okay, we have a student from another school that was suspended 4 times before reaching us, but he's included in our 12%. Wait a minute, we didn't even suspend him. How do we get his numbers? So I think it's all put in perspective. You really have to look at the numbers and not just accept them. We have to look at what we can do for these individual students and not just say, oh, we have a high suspension rate, because I don't think that's true, and I don't think that's acceptable.
Thank you, Lori. I just want to introduce real quick. Thank you. Sister Judy Donovan. I'm not seeing her. Where is she? One of the things that VEA has done is so fortunate. Sister Judy Donovan contacted me in the fall, and can you come up just for a minute and kind of talk about what you're doing?
I'm bringing with me Pastor Deck here from this church. There. Good evening. This is such an important conversation to have, and we're really pleased to be beginning a relationship with VEA. I'm an organizer with the Industrial Areas Foundation. We have organizations of community institutions like churches and synagogues and schools and neighborhood nonprofits in a number of areas in the state who partner very strongly together with the CTA in many, many districts. David Hernandez and I go back to LA and organizing in the LAUSD. And so we have organizations all around Vallejo and none here. So I began knocking on Mark and Crystal's door about a year ago saying that we were exploring building an effort that would include the city of Vallejo, and we'd like to explore what that relationship would look like. So Crystal came and spoke very powerfully at a 500-person economic conference we had last October, and has spoken here at an assembly we had for the first time, bringing together 22 different religious and nonprofit institutions in February, talking about the reality of violence in schools and the commitment of teachers here. So we're very excited to be pursuing this relationship and look what it might be like to create community allies for the work that you're trying to do through the kinds of organizing that we do, which is a bit different than the kind of organizing you do, but it works very complementary in many parts of the state. Pastor Deck is one of the pastors who's a part of this effort trying to build this and generously offered to host you today. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Just glad to be here. We have a lot of pastors in Napa, Fairfield, Vallejo, Cordelia that are coming together to talk about these kind of issues. Most of those churches are not very large. Like, this building is huge. We have a very small congregation, but we're trying to unite together to solve these kind of problems. So when Crystal called and said we'd like to have a community forum, I said that's exactly what we want to do. We want to have you here so that we can work on these problems together. So we're very glad to partner with you to do this. Thanks.
I have 3 children. My oldest is 23, my youngest is 16. My youngest actually went to school here in Vallejo from 3rd until 8th grade. And then when we decided to close Hogan High, he doesn't deal well with change, and so I didn't think it would be good to throw him in the mix of that. And so he's back in Fairfield where I live. My daughter is 23 years old. Since she has graduated from high school, she's had 5 of her friends murdered. I'm a middle-class person, white person. That's not supposed to happen to my kids. That's kind of the perception, right? But my kids have grown up in diverse communities. They have friends of all types of backgrounds, and she has been devastated. I just found out that one of my high school colleagues passed away from liver failure this past week. That's like the first death that I've had to deal with since I graduated from high school. And she's had to deal with 5, and she's only been out of high school for 5 years. That's what our kids are facing. So how can we expect them to come into our classrooms and be ready to learn when they have close family members who are incarcerated, when they have close family members who have been murdered? And then yet we are cutting and cutting and cutting our educational system, not even to the marrow. I don't even think there's any marrow left. How can we expect our kids to perform when there's nothing there? But yet we're told, our teachers are told, increase those test scores with your larger class sizes. School districts, you're going to be labeled as a failure if you don't have 100% proficiency in a year, 2014. But you better do your job, even though we cut more and more and more. So at this point, perfect segue, I'm going to turn it over to Eric.
Well, that's a great way. First of all, I want to say to Pastor Deck Warrior, I want to say thank you for hosting us here. Both my father was, and my younger brother are both Presbyterian ministers. My younger brother is in Utah, so you can appreciate. Wait, do I need my mic, or can I use my elementary teacher voice? So I'm a teacher in Pittsburgh, not very far from here, an elementary school teacher, and I've been in education about 21 years, and now I'm fortunate enough to have been elected and serving as the vice president of the California Teachers Association. And in that capacity, I get to travel up and down the state and see a lot of districts. And what I'm seeing, and I think what you've heard here so far, is a lot of frustration, both from the teachers that express themselves here, and I think that's true up and down the state. First of all, when I see a light in the distance and I'm in a church, far off in the distance, a bright light, I say, I'm not ready. I am not going to go to the light, so I'm going to stay down here. Just saying. Let me first also really start by saying thank you to the community members that are here. I want to appreciate you for being here and taking the time this evening for being here. CTA is a big organization. We represent about 325,000 educators in the state, not just teachers, but also librarians and speech therapists and other certificated support personnel, but also bus drivers and secretaries and custodians and a lot of educators and stakeholders. But as big as we are, and sometimes, we're this big, powerful lobby in Sacramento, you may read that, we're not big enough to fix the problems of this state. That's going to require us, and by us I mean all of the educators sitting here in the room, to work in partnership with you as the community to fix the problem, because this is really a bizarre world we're living in, and it's really unprecedented. We've been through these things, cycles, the economic cycles, but I don't think that any of us have lived through anything like this since maybe the Great Depression, and I don't see anybody here in this room that looks like they were even around in the Great Depression, and if you were, good for you. Sorry you have to go through this twice, but it's really a bizarre world, and the attacks that working men and women are facing in California are just phenomenal, Crystal asked me to come and talk about the budget, and boy, what a downer that's going to be. I'm really sorry I didn't bring Prozac licks with me. It's really depressing in a way to talk about it, because the May revision came out. Let me talk a little bit first about the budget process. It's always initiated for the following year. The governor makes a proposal in January, and this kind of lays out what the governor's priorities are. And then around May, which was actually last Monday, called the May revision comes out. And that means that most of the numbers, like the tax receipts and all those kinds of things, are a little more updated, and they have a better idea of what the revenues of the state are. Well, then the governor issues what's called a May revision, and then the bartering starts, and the legislature starts working on it. So what we have, the May revision came out last Monday, just a couple of days ago. And what we found is that it's actually worse than the governor actually anticipated in terms of revenues. And we've been talking a lot about billions. Now, I don't know about you, but we transitioned from millions to billions, and I don't know when that happened. But how many of you really know how much a billion is? It's a lot. It's like, oh, you must be a math teacher. It's a lot. Let me explain just a little bit. I actually had to look it up on the internet. So just kind of have an idea. If a million seconds is 12 days. A billion seconds would be 31 years. Just to put it in perspective, a million minutes ago was at 1 year, 329 days and 10 hours and 40 minutes. A billion minutes ago was around the time of Christ. A million hours was 1885. A billion hours ago, man had not even walked on the earth, or woman. I mean, that puts it kind of in perspective, doesn't it? And when we go up to trillion, when we're talking about the US deficit, when we talk about trillions, that's a number that only politicians use. And I think it's because they don't really think about it. And what I've heard is that even mathematicians don't use a trillion because it's such a bizarre number to use. So we're really talking about a lot of money. And when we talk about schools being cut, and schools have taken about $20 billion in cuts over the last, schools in California, not just Vallejo, but schools in California have taken about $20 billion cuts over the last few years. That's a lot of money to have lost, and it's really been most of the share of, more than the share of the K-12 budget that was in part of the California budget. Because we have a proposition that's a kind of a minimum school funding guarantee, and you may hear me refer to it or someone else talk about it as Prop 98, which was passed several years ago. And it guarantees a minimum of about 40% of the state budget. But schools have been cut much larger number than that over the past few years. That's translated into a little over 40,000 teachers that have lost their jobs over the last, across the way. That's meant larger class sizes. That meant students being put at risk because there aren't many adults in schools. And we went and visited some of the schools in Vallejo, and tell you some of the stories I heard were just shocking. And as we were sitting in, I think it was Franklin Middle School, we were sitting in the lunchroom, and the students were moving from lunch as I was talking to some of the 6th grade teachers, and right in the middle of the window, as if they were planted there, 3 students were, jumped this other student and started just pounding on him. And they were doing it as a joke. Now, that wasn't a violent attack, but it was a violent attack. And it was a kind of attack that can transition from a joke to something serious like that, right? When somebody gets mad or somebody does that. And it happened twice, in maybe the 10 minutes I was sitting there. And that's not a reflection of the kids being bad. It's a reflection that there just aren't enough adults in the schools to supervise them appropriately. It also means, of course, we hear a lot of talk about the administrators, and I'm not here to attack administrators or anything like that, but it does mean that we have a problem here in Vallejo, and it's part of it. A lot of it is due to the budget and the monies that are cut. Now, the governor's budget, and I'm not going to go through all the numbers. I've got 4 pages here of budget numbers. If you're really that interested, after you've seen your psychiatrist, come and talk to me, and I'll be happy to come and talk to you about what the numbers really are, about what the deferrals and ADA and all that other kind of stuff. A couple of things I want to talk about, though, I think highlights that you may have heard about or read about in the paper. One is transitional kindergarten. Initially, the governor, we're moving up the date of entrance to kindergarten from December 3rd to September 3rd. Over the few years, it's being progressively moved up. Now, any kindergarten teachers in here? I've taught kindergarten, and we all know that it makes a big difference when kids come in and enter kindergarten at a little bit of an older age. But what happens to those kids who are no longer eligible to go to kindergarten, those who were born between September and December, who would normally come to kindergarten? Well, we don't necessarily have a place for them to go in preschool, so when they passed the legislation moving up the age, they created what's called a transitional kindergarten. And what that meant is that kids really get to go to school that are that young, get to go to school 2 years to kindergarten. Well, as part of the budget deficit, the governor initially said, well, we can't really afford that anymore, so instead of making that mandatory, we're going to make it voluntary. Well, of course, kindergarten teachers and CTA said, that's not okay because these kids have no place to go. Right? What are they going to do? If they can't come to school, there's not enough preschool for them, they're just not going to go anywhere. So as the May revision came up, they said, okay, we'll change our mind, we're going to fund that. We're not going to mandate it. I don't know if you're going to be doing it here in Vallejo, so that's a good thing for those kids. They'll actually get a little bit of extra time. But if you decide to do it, it will be funded. I know I see teachers crossing their fingers. That's a good thing. You may also hear of something called the weighted student formula, which changes the way the schools are going to be funded. Now, schools are funded that's a very complicated formula, the way they're funded. There are a lot of categorical programs, which are money that are targeted to very specific things like elementary class size reduction, language learners, those kinds of things. And what they're proposing to do is kind of throw that all together into one big pot and then hand it out to the schools. Now, we don't think now's the time to play for that because it creates winners and losers within the schools. And we're hoping that the governor will change his mind in terms of that. But we do think it's an important discussion to have, how schools are funded. But not now. In terms of when we just have crumbs on the plate, we don't think the time now to discuss about how you're going to arrange those crumbs, right? And take some from some districts and start, pushing them towards other districts. And it's just not really the time. The third thing, and it's really one of the most important things for us here in California as voters, has to do with the governor's tax initiative. because everything that the governor has done in the budget is relating to the tax initiative. It's you may have heard there was a millionaire's tax, and there's about like three or four tax initiatives that were out there floating. Well, now we're down to two. One is put out by a wealthy philanthropist called Molly Munger, who's already, I think, begun advertising her, and it's a kind of a tax on everybody. It's a graduated tax, but everybody's going to pay a little bit more in income tax. And then there's the governor has put also a tax initiative. Now there are some very big differences in these two tax initiatives. The governor's tax initiative actually goes into the state budget, and that helps deal with some of the deficit that we're feeling in the governor's budget. The Munger tax does not, but I don't really talking against the Mungers, I'm just talking for the governors. But it's about $5 billion in revenues, and then in the future years it just keeps on going because it keeps on compounding because it gets added to that minimum school funding guarantee. If it doesn't pass in November, that means that schools in California will be cut about another $4.8 billion. Now remember how much I said a billion is? Think how much schools in Vallejo have already been cut over the last few years. There was a Stanford study that came out about 2007, I think maybe it was, before all this debt crisis. And that Stanford study said that in order for schools in California to be properly funded and to do what they need to do to educate our children, we need an additional $30 billion. Now you add that onto the $20 billion we've lost, we're already 50 behind. If we pass this initiative, which we need to do, if we don't pass the initiative, we lose another 5. If we do pass the initiative, we're still 50 behind. So this is only the beginning. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard place. And this is really tough, and this is why it's important that you're here. Because the students that are here, this is their time in school. You know, for my second grade classroom, this was their year to be in second grade. They don't get another chance. They don't get to like wait until the budget gets better and get to redo second grade or to get to learn, you know, how to read all over again, because they're going to be moving on. And so we really are not just robbing our children of their future. We're robbing California of our economic future, because these are people who are going to be creating economy in the world. It's really important that we work here and that we work to pass the governor's tax initiative. There's another tax initiative another initiative that's also on the ballot, which I can't walk off without talking about for at least a couple of minutes. It's called the Stop Special Interest Money. We call it the Stop Special Exemptions Act, because what it does is it exempts. It's a initiative that's specifically designed to exempt these secretive super PACs from limiting their political donations and using their political money, but attacks working people in the community through their associations, through their unions, firefighters, teachers, nurses, and people who are, you know, everyday workers who help contribute and who actually are the real job creators in our economy. While these super PACs will be unfettered and be able to spend as much as they want to as they continue to do. And we already know what that's already when we saw the Republican primary of what that's doing to our political process. In addition to that, it doesn't do anything to fix anything in Sacramento. So we want to be sure when that comes and when that gets a number, you'll be hearing a lot more about it from Crystal and from VEA, I'm sure. We need to vote that down as well. I'm not going to talk much more.
Okay. I just want to introduce a couple people.
Sure, and then we'll ask questions.
Yeah, we're going to have a question. Assembly member Michael Allens, Tom Barty is here. If you could stand up for a minute. Thank you. And then we also have one of our trustees from the Vallejo City Unified School District, Tony Ubaldi, if you could stand up. And then at this point, what I thought we would do is, if you guys have questions of Eric in regards to what he has just talked about, now is your opportunity to ask questions. We'll do that for about 10 minutes or so. Anybody have any questions?
Hi. So about the tax initiatives, when you said the governor's money goes into the budget, but the other one does not, what did you mean? And then also, what are the limits in what can be used, the money can be used for? So for example, on the other initiative, the Munger one, for lack of a better word, or label, I heard, and I don't know if it's true, that it's not going to salaries or anything. So like I asked, well, do either of the initiatives fix furlough days, for example?
Right.
And then if the other initiative, the Munger one, fixes programs and money, how do you actually implement a program if you have no teachers teaching the program? So how does that work?
Sure. The two initiatives differ in one significant way. We'll call it the Munger Initiative. That initiative establishes a separate trust fund outside of the budget. And what they say, because it's not, the politicians can't get their hands on it. It only goes to pre-K through 12 education. There's nothing for higher education, but it's outside of the budget. Therefore, there's nothing that goes to take care of the deficit in the budget. That's a really big thing for us, because the deficit is the shortfall of what the revenues come in. What the governor's budget does is it fixes the deficit. It also goes in, it doesn't fix the deficit, but I mean, it goes a long way in starting to reduce the deficit. It also goes a long way in paying back money that's owed to the schools. So it's called the maintenance factor, and the deferrals that schools have had payment deferred on. And so that's a big deal. And since it goes into the Proposition 98 minimum school funding guarantee, that continues to build over the next 5 years or so actually raises more money. And so that loosens up also more money for higher education in the CSUs and the USCs and all that, because they're also seeing a $350 million cut in this budget, and if the governor's tax initiative fails, they'll see another $350 million cut from their budgets. And we all know, for those of you who have kids in higher education, how much we're already haven't kept our end of the bargain in terms of promise to provide a quality higher education for those students, in terms of providing room and not raising tuitions and all that other kind of stuff. So that's one of the other big differences in those two. Regarding the salary piece, the Munger Initiative doesn't allow for it to be for like salary increases and that kind of thing. It will go for salaries if they create new programs with it. They can hire new teachers to teach in those programs, so it'll pay for salaries in that sense, right? But it will do nothing to restore furlough days, or and I know the teachers here are having their first pay cut day tomorrow, and the students are having their first lost instructional day tomorrow, and that's a lost teaching day. So it's bad for everybody.
And what it means for Vallejo next year, without the initiative, is at least 5 days of pay cut / furlough days, which means 5 less instructional days for our kids here at Vallejo. And we basically, I think CSEA and VEA both, we have it in our agreements that if we need to go back to the bargaining table to give up more days, then we have the option of doing that if we're cut even more. So there's a very real possibility. The governor's talking, a week and a half, 2 weeks of reducing the school year if the initiative doesn't pass. So this is huge. I just wanted to introduce one other person that has just walked in the door, Dan Healy, Solano County Judge. If you could stand up and wave your hand. Thank you, I appreciate it. Any other questions? Okay.
No, I don't have a question. I just have a favor that I would ask of Mr. Hines.
Sure.
When you speak of higher education, the element, the component of higher education that educates the most students, takes the biggest hit of the upper division, are the community colleges.
Right.
And I would ask that when you make this statement, please don't leave community colleges out. I probably should introduce myself. I sit on the governing board at Solano Community College, and we have suffered huge hits.
Absolutely.
So please remember us, because we get more of your students than anyone else does.
And the reason I separated it out, let me just explain, is because the community colleges are part of the Proposition 98 guarantee. So as the Proposition 98 guarantee goes up, it also helps the funding for community colleges as well as K-12. When I talked about the cuts to the USCs and the UCs, those are outside of the Prop 98 guarantee. So the $350 million that they're getting cut is separate from the money that's being cut to the K-14 system. That's why I mentioned the CSUs separately.
Okay.
But when I'm talking about the Prop 98 guarantee, I really mean pre-K through 14. So that includes the community colleges. And then I should have been more specific, so thank you for pointing that out. Because they are the biggest educational system in the country. Absolutely.
Any other questions in regards? Thank you.
Can I get a few minutes to talk up front?
Sure.
My name's Dave Carey. I'm a high-tech executive. I moved here with my family in '99 with our 2 boys for Vallejo's Potential. And I love this town, love the people, but they were in middle school when our district ran into its problems. And I've been nothing but disappointed in the leadership since. I've gone to them, I don't mean to sound like the Pied Piper, but I've gone to them with solutions for both saving millions of dollars in ways that are proven to help the kids achieve and to get nearly every kid to college. Since that time, I've traveled the country, I've visited the winning charter schools, I've learned what they do. There are schools in the worst poverty areas that get nearly perfect scores on API, get almost 100% of their kids to college, and the strategies they use are entirely different to what we're doing. So the question is, does this town want our children to win? And do you want to win teachers? Julian Bond once said, violence is black children spending 12 years in public education and receiving 6 years worth of schooling. That's what's going on. We have 50% of our kids dropping out. Of those who graduate from our high schools, only 20% are ready for college. And when you do the math, that means only 1% to 2% of our minority males will make it to and through college. In today's world, that's not going to be satisfactory. The question is, $20,000 grant is great. I heard the talk about the budgets. I've looked at both budgets, Molly's and the other, in the governor's budget. If you want the money to go to the classroom, to the real reforms that get kids to and through college, the governor's budget is not, their plan is not the right one. You need to support Molly's budget if you want the money to go to classroom and to the right reforms. I don't mean to be a pain in people's butts, but that's what has to happen. It's time for us to give our kids a complete and comprehensive education. That means going to a longer day, a year-round format. That means that we cannot depend on parents to take care of the academic education of our kids. And that means that we need to provide comprehensive care before and after school. It's possible. It's possible with the funding that Molly's program puts into place. I think this community needs to have more detailed conversations, take our head out of the sand, and start really getting serious about education reform. And I guess encourage or challenge you guys to have that conversation at another time.
Thank you.
So I don't want to get into a debate. Thank you for coming, but I just wanted to say a couple of things, maybe a little bit of a couple of corrections. The related to the Munger Initiative. I know any money that's good for schools, that goes to schools is good. The issues with the reason we have issues and prefer the governors over Molly Munger's initiative is because Molly Munger's initiative, number one, doesn't have any policy in it. I don't know, the longer, whether you have to do a longer day or year round, those are all reform things, but they're not part of the tax initiative. You can use it to pay for that, sure. I mean, that's true, but that would still be a local decision and locally bargained and all that. And you just need what you're really saying is we need more resources in schools to be able to talk about those kinds of reforms, whether they're longer days or how we change the thing of the school year or the type of curriculums we teach, those kinds of reforms that we know work, and that CTA has been very involved in type of school reforms. That's the question that to me you were really raising here in terms of the kinds of reforms that we do, but we need resources to do that, and I'm sure you understand that in business, when you do research and development, and when you do all those kinds of things like the tech industry has been great in doing in terms of innovation, it's been because they've had the resources to be able to invest in their future products and testing and research and doing all the kinds of things that are true. The same is true for schools. They need the resources to be able to do the kinds of things that we know already work. Now, we believe, and again, I don't want to speak against the Munger Initiative, we don't believe it does enough because it puts the money in the wrong place. There's another issue around who taxes, then facts of who gets taxed in terms of raised income tax. That means it raises income tax also from low wage earners all the way up the spectrum. Yeah, it does it in a graduated scale, but that means somebody who makes $40,000 is also going to see their taxes raised in addition to those up here, maybe a little less, but I'll tell you, even a little less income on somebody who makes $40,000 a year is a big deal. And we believe that's the wrong approach. That we believe also that the governors, we need to fix the statutory rate in the governor's things. But that's, we can debate the things. What we really need to do is focus on what the schools need. We also need to address the higher education issue, which is, a separate in terms of resources and things, that type of nature. But the reforms issues, I will be happy to talk about that all evening. Because that's really what it's, what it's all about in addition to the resources necessary.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question, and then what I'd like to do is move the agenda.
Right. My name's Susanna Urias, and it's not really a question, it's a statement. I didn't come here to get political. I came here for my students. I teach at Solano Middle School, 6th grade. And at Solano Middle School this year, I don't know if you're aware, we started off, every middle school started off with, and what both of you are saying is great, but I'm just here for my students. We started off with 3 campus supervisors. Every other middle school started off with 4 campus supervisors. Our campus supervisors, there's been inconsistency with some of them, and when you're a teacher, you really want to have consistency with the students. I know my parents, some of them work 2 jobs, some of them have no jobs, but every time I have a parent conference, I have a high number of parents that show up. We just had a 6th grade assembly. We had over 100 parents that did not, some of them missed work to show up to that assembly. So I know the parents, at least at my school, back their child. I know we have parent involvement. The problem is there's no consistency from the school board, Ms. Bishop, to the middle school. And I'll just say this, I don't know how much I could say, but we had a person come on campus, a teenager, come on campus with a gun looking for an 8th grader. He did find this 8th grader. That's not okay with me. So I came here tonight not to get political, but to bring up concerns I have for my students. What I see happening, the pot smoking, the fighting. We have 2 teachers out right now, one on stress leave, one because they broke up a fight. We had another teacher out in fall because they broke up a fight. That's not okay with me. I have teachers that are stressed out, that they are concerned. They feel their safety it's just, I don't know the right word for it, but the stuff I see is not okay with me. It's not okay to have a teenager come on campus with a gun looking for a student, make contact with that student, and then we have to have a campus supervisor chase that student off campus. So that's why I'm here. And I know that I have parents that care, but I also know I have parents that are stressed out. And I really don't want to get political. I think that's for another date. We just really need to do something. And I also want to say, I think Ms. Bishop's really out of touch with what's going on at our school, at least. I know with our school, she's out of touch.
So let me just, in closing, since we can't take any more, make 2 comments. What was your name again? Yeah. Susanna, I'll tell you a secret. I didn't come here for politics either. And I don't know of any teacher who's gone into teaching because of politics. The problem is that everything we do in schools and everything you do in schools for your children, whether it's your speech, whether it's the campus you walk on, whether it's how you are allowed to dress, talk, what you teach your kids, how you teach your kids is controlled by politics. Everything. The safety issues that you concern about a student walking on campus with a gun, controlled by politics, because it's also controlled by resources. That's why I'm in politics, because of the kids. Just like you. We're all about that. We can't separate the two because everything we do is controlled by politics. And so we can have those healthy debates, and I think it's important because we're all here for the teachers and for the educators in the site, and we're all here for the kids. And that's really what it's all about. And the last thing, I don't want to leave everybody depressed, like it's Sue, because we have an opportunity here in this crisis to reshape the way we do things. And because you're here, because the educators are here, we need to continue to have the conversation. Whether we agree or disagree on policy, we need to have a respectful and deep conversation about our schools, because the promise that we made to our children in California and the promise we make as a democracy in California and in the United States is too important not to. And so I encourage you to continue the dialogue and continue the conversation with me here, with not me here, with Crystal, with the teachers, with the community members, with the faith-based community, with everybody here, because it's just too important for the children of this community and for our state. So thank you very much for the time.